Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to San Benito County and welcome to our Board of Supervisors chambers. I'm really excited to be able to open this up and welcome you all here. We have an amazing group of people and we've been working really hard with the Latino Coalition really over not quite a year, but I feel like it's been for the better part of this year. Supervisor Zenger and myself have sat on a group with the Latino Coalition. They really have spearheaded this collaborative meeting group and with some other nonprofits and other private citizens. And it's really an opportunity for all of us over this past year to talk about housing, affordability, the lack of housing, farm worker housing, and that's really led us to where we are today. And so it is one of the most pressing issues facing our community, and while yes, we rank number 2 or number 3 for growth in the entire state, we really have done, most of that growth has been market rate housing, and we haven't done enough for our affordable farm worker. And so I'm really excited to hear from our speakers this afternoon that will be talking about some different alternatives and things maybe for us just to keep our minds open. Does this maybe work in San Benito County? They're going to share some of their projects that's in a different part of the state, but I think right now we need to explore all options. And I think it's a really exciting time because there's so much collaboration and there's so much communication happening. And I'm really excited about kind of the opportunities. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Abraham Prado, our Director of Planning and Building Services.
Thank you, Chair Sotelo, for the introduction. As Chair Sotelo indicated, my name is Abraham Prado, and I work as Director of Planning and Building Services for the County of San Benito. And one of the things that we are trying to do at the moment for the county is update our housing element. The Board of Supervisors has been very supportive of going through this process of the update of the housing element. And very briefly, the update of the housing element involves essentially a legal document that's required by the State of California Housing and Community Development, HCD. We live in an acronym world now, society. So HCD basically requires of every jurisdiction essentially a document that's called a housing element. Bienvenida, Maria. A housing element that essentially addresses the housing needs of the community, and not only addresses the housing needs of the community, but also requires the jurisdiction to provide housing policy to try to address those needs, to try to meet those needs when it comes, for example, affordable housing, workforce housing, special needs housing, and within that special needs housing component, we have farm worker housing, we have age-restricted housing, 55 and over, as per indicated by the state. We have American with Disabilities Act housing, single-parent household housing, and others within that category. And then another very important category within the housing element that we are required to address is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, another acronym, RHNA. Maybe a lot of you have heard of that RHNA number. Essentially, the state of California addresses this to each of the jurisdictions. In our particular county, San Benito, it provides it to the San Benito County Council of Governments. And the San Benito County Council of Governments then works with San Juan Bautista, the city of Hollister, and the county to essentially allocate those numbers. And for the San Benito County and the cities, our number is 5,005 residential units that we must plan for, with the ultimate goal of building, not necessarily required to build, but at least plan for these units. And I'll just briefly talk a little bit more about that. And within those 5,005 units, essentially those are divided between the cities and the county. And the city of Hollister, they have the municipal services, sewer, water, drainage. They have the larger part of the allocations, a little bit over 4,000. San Juan Bautista has a little bit less than 100, and the county of San Benito has 754 units. And within this amount of units that each jurisdiction has, each jurisdiction has to be able to allocate those units and in a form where it addresses all types of income levels. And essentially the categories are, as you can see, I don't have it in the screen, but in the screen it shows very low income, and that goes up to 50% of the area median income, low income, moderate, and above moderate income. And essentially, above moderate is the market rate homes, and as Chairperson Sotelo indicated, uh, ba- basically over the last few years, we haven't had much of an issue with meeting the development of the above moderate, but we have had issues regarding meeting the needs of the affordability, moderate and uh, very low and low income. And just very briefly, San Benito County actually has an area median income of $140,200 for a family of four. And that is very, very inflated. It's actually higher than Santa Cruz County, and it's higher than Monterey County. Of course, not higher than Santa Clara County, but one of the reasons is that the majority of the people that live here in San Benito County and work, they actually work outside of the county of San Benito, mostly in Santa Clara County, where the area median income for a family of four is upwards of 180,000 for a family of four. It's very important for us to be able to address the needs. In September, we had a workshop, and we had families that rose their hand, and they said, I'm within that, 17 percentile. I'm within that 24 percentile, making less than $30,000 a year. Our family making less than $20,000 a year, and we work full-time jobs in agriculture, and we work full-time jobs and different sectors. So, very important for us as a jurisdiction and as a community to work together to be able to address these housing needs that we have. Just a breakdown of housing types. We have the majority of the housing that we have in San Benito County, 82%, is single-family homes. And we have a smaller percentage on multifamily homes, very similar to that of the city of Hollister, which I've read their documents, as well, and they do have a similar percentage regarding single-family homes. Comparable to Santa Cruz and Monterey County, which is in the region, they're more at the 70 percentile for single families, and the state of California overall, they're more within the 60 percentile. So this here alone tells us that there should be a balance of housing regarding our needs, and so this is important information for us to share with the community and with the board to potentially provide housing policy or land use policy to try to address the multifamily component, more of a multifamily component as land use policy or as housing policy to be able to include in our housing element. Did you have a question, John? I'm almost done, but if it's yeah.
There you go.
On those family incomes,
Yes.
does it separate or consider single income
Yes.
earner versus two income earners in the same house? So you could have like one parent is working, one is staying home, versus both parents are working, and maybe it's babysitter for children. I'm interested in the distribution there.
Sure. Yeah, and the breakdown is, the breakdown is from one single person, one person household, all the way through. I think it goes up to 8 or so that the state has. So yeah, multiple. Correct. Yes, within the household. Yeah. Some of the land use constraints or non-governmental constraints for housing in San Benito County and pretty much throughout, it's no secret, land costs are high, construction costs are high, availability of financing, there's environmental constraints, including cultural resources and geologic hazards that we see. One of the things that I can't stress enough is that in order for a community or a jurisdiction such as San Benito to be able to provide for affordable housing, for workforce housing, for farm worker housing, special needs housing, very important to collaborate with developers that are able to provide for affordable housing, to collaborate with nonprofit organizations such as CSDC, CHISPA, and others. I see Matt Huerta here. Monterey Bay Economic Partnership has been crucial over the past years, helping us make those connections, because it's really important that they help with the entitlement process and then the overall construction process of this. In my over 15 years experience with creating affordable housing, working with Matt directly back in the South County housing years. We've developed over 300 affordable housing, deed restricted, and entitled, over 500. But it's important to have that connection, that collaboration with these organizations to help get the developments built. And the other part, not only collaboration, the other important part is policy. Very important to create policy at a local, state, federal level to be able to have the opportunity to create affordable housing units. One that I want to mention, or two, locally, for example, the Board of Supervisors have indicated that if there is a development that comes in at 100% affordable housing, then there's an opportunity to waive the impact fees. And that is a huge win. That is a huge encouragement and incentive for developers that are in the business of affordable housing to be able to bring in the units. And another is we have the Farm Worker Housing Act that was enacted recently. A big part of that was our very own Robert Rivas, who played a big role in adopting that policy, which basically allows for a certain number of units to be built on an agricultural zoned parcel that's actively engaged in ag, and there could be a certain amount of units that could be built within these parcels without having to go through the whole discretionary process of a conditional use permit, without having to go through the whole environmental impact report procedure or process. However, we've had a lot of discussions, especially with the Latino Coalition, on this topic, and we know that there is a lot of things have to line up in order for this to happen. For example, a lot of the agricultural lands are outside of the city limits, where we have the sewer, where we have the water, where we have the drainage, and so therefore, if there is not a possibility to be able to extend the existing sewer, water, and other infrastructure, then the property owner has to see how to hook up to these units. Off the top of my head, there can be up to 12 units, and so therefore, is there water available in the property? Is there a well? And if there's a well, is it functioning? Is it good? Would it be able to serve units? How many units would it be able to serve? There's some areas within the county where, unfortunately, there's contamination. There is a level of chromium-6 in certain areas where it would be considered a contaminant within the wells. And so, can they connect to homes? Can it serve homes? Can there be a septic tank that's able to be placed on the property? And if so, how many units can it serve? And all that has to be prepared by a certified engineer and be taken to our environmental health department, and our environmental health department would have to give it a go before it goes to the building department for building permits. And so there's a lot of connections, and there's a lot of parts to it that have to line up in order for us to make it work. And so we know there is a big need. We've heard it loud and clear from the community during this update of the general plan housing element process. Lastly, I just want to say that staff is working on the updated general plan. We hope to have a draft later this month or by next month in January, and we hope to have a follow-up workshop with the community, and hopefully we'll see you all here. And if you haven't signed up for our invites and just information, please, you can contact our wonderful clerk Stephanie, associate planner, our wonderful principal planner Ariel, or myself, and we'll be happy to take your information and keep you apprised of all the activities that we have going on here in the county of San Benito. Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'm not sure if we're going to pass it on to
I believe Richard Perez is on the schedule next.
Richard Perez. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here, and I'm an advisor for the Latino Coalition. Our mission is to create equity across the board in San Benito County for our residents. And some of the things that Abraham mentioned about housing have to go hand in hand with economic development. Equity starts with being able to have sustainable income and afford a place to live. So not only is it our mission as the Latino Coalition to offer housing, but to also bring agriculture into another phase which will be economically sustainable for the employees who now work the agricultural industry. I'm pleased to help the Latino Coalition in this mission, and I'm very eager to work with all of our partners to help bring affordable housing, but also economic development and sustainability to our community. I've been on the Farm Worker Task Force since 2019 when the pandemic hit, and the digital divide is real, and some of these sustainable homes need to be thought of as environmentally friendly, but also connectivity is very important. So those are the criteria that we're trying to meet with our mission in helping our community. And I'd like to introduce Shirley Trevino, who can bring up more of the Farm Worker Task Force and how we plan to help our community. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Shirley Trevino with the Farm Worker Task Force of the Latino Coalition, and we've done a lot of great work with farm workers in this community and our community in San Juan Bautista. As all of you know, California is the largest producer of agricultural goods in the country and is one of the largest agricultural producing regions of the world. And farm workers play a key role in the operation and delivery of the state's food system. Despite this, farm workers face a number of economic disadvantages compared to California population as a whole. Farm workers tend to have the lowest wages, higher risk of poverty, and limited access to safe and healthy affordable housing choices. As you heard Abraham say, we built houses for people who don't even work here, yet we have not built houses for farm workers who live here. And I think it's important to realize that the reason this committee and this task force and the people that are involved in this whole idea of creating affordable housing, especially for farm workers, came about is because there was a flood that destroyed many homes of farm workers, those especially that were living in RVs and in mobile homes. And as a result of that flood, FEMA came in and gave the opportunity for them to live in the labor camp over here on, with the RVs. But then that money ran out and they got displaced. And where are they going? They're still living in those RVs that are contaminated because they were impacted by the flood. And so, as part of the Latino Coalition, the Farm Worker Task Force, this whole group, Mickey and the Latino Coalition brought this whole group together to address that issue. And we have to continue to address that issue within our county and throughout the state. The characteristics of the farm worker population have changed during the past 2 decades. There has been a decrease in the number of single farm workers. And in 1990, 41% of farm workers lived alone. Today, a percentage of farm workers working alongside or live with family members. So who are we talking about in terms of needing housing? It's not that single farm worker anymore who had the labor camps. It's families, it's kids, it's children who don't have those places to live and are now living, still in poverty and lack of housing. So I am proud that our county is starting to address this issue. I'm proud that I belong to the Latino Coalition and the Farm Worker Task Force, who has raised the issue with the county and in our communities, because there's this dire need for farm workers to be able to have that housing available to them. And we want to make sure that when these issues of housing are addressed, it's not only addressed in terms of affordable housing for all people in our community, but for farm worker housing in our community. And we're thankful to our speaker, because he brought forth to the state of California the whole idea of funding farm worker housing, and we have to make sure that we continue to look at those resources for farm workers in our community. Thank you.
And next we'll invite up Mickey Solorio Luna to introduce our moderator, Nora Campos.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that is online and also that is here present. On behalf of the Latino Coalition of San Benito County, it is extremely important on what we are addressing today and what we will continue to address in the future. Our organization, as many know, we have been around for 36 years. We are a nonprofit. We actually are grassroots, and we have made some changes, but to the good, because now the Latino Coalition is working directly with federal agencies, state and federal agencies, and because we are grassroots, we are able to bring forward a session like it is today. You will be listening to some experts in housing, experts in water, and I really believe that our community is in dire need of the assistance. Many times we elect our elected officials because they're the representatives of the people to make those decisions, but alone, sometimes they cannot do it. It takes organizations like the Latino Coalition, our partnerships, to actually bring forward what the goals of this community should be, and that is right now the priority is housing. So right now I would like to introduce the moderator for this session. A good friend of mine, a friend that has been and is very well known in the San Jose area as a former city council member, as a former assembly member, and Nora Campos has done probably what people thought could not be done. So with that, she's a good friend. She's here, and I'm just glad that we have her here with us today. And it won't be the last time, because we're going to continue these sessions. We are now focusing on several issues in San Benito County, and I know we're going to have a lot more Noras, a lot more Eli Cortez, a lot more people with us to address these issues and concerns of the community. So without any ado, I introduce to you my friend Nora Campos.
Thank you, Mickey. It is an honor to be here with the Latino Coalition of San Benito County and the city as well. So thank you, county, excuse me, for having us here. One of the things that I wanted to just share before I get into introducing your panel is that housing has been an issue for the state of California. It's just not here. It's all over the state of California. But I think the interesting thing that we're going to hear today is how the Latino Coalition has really taken the lead, as other counties are taking the lead, about putting funding and putting policies that will change the dynamics as we move forward in creating permanent housing for our farm workers. And that is something that has moved at the state of California, but not in the speed that we will start to see as we have organizations and hopefully policymakers that make this a priority at the forefront. It was mentioned earlier that Speaker Rivas has taken the lead on that, and he is from this area. So that is a plus to have an ally that understands an issue that is important to your community. So thank you to the Latino Coalition of San Benito County for taking the lead and having me here today. I really appreciate that. So with that, I am going to introduce the main speaker who will be presenting to all of you today. And he is a friend, and his name is Eli Cortez, who is the CEO of CIO Pro Incorporated, has extensive experience in delivering successful integrated technology and energy solutions to both the private and public sector. Eli Cortez is Emeritus, the State of California Cabinet Secretary of Technology, State CIO, previously County of San Benito CIO, and past Director of Information Technology, San Benito Technology at Los Angeles Unified School District. I think the interesting thing about having Eli is that he has done this work before. He is on the cutting edge of bringing the best individuals to make sure that we're addressing housing to the population that has not been housed. And when we talk about housing, especially for our extremely low income housing individuals, is that we're creating communities that give respect, give dignity, and create stability. I think, Ms. Trevino, you hit it on the head when you mentioned that it's not just single individuals in the farm workers housing anymore, it's family. And our children need to have stability. And the only way they have stability is by having a home where they can get an education and they don't have to pick up and go somewhere else. So when we think about today's session, we need to think about the bigger picture and who it will affect. So with that, Eli, I know you will be introducing your team as you go along. So with an hour and a half left, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then at the end we will have questions from the audience, and I will have a few questions for you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Thank you. First of all, it's a beautiful day out here in County of San Benito. Sometimes I confuse it with San Bernardino, which is another one of my clients. So I apologize in advance if I misquote. But the bottom line is I'm here. I'm excited to be here, and I'm here to share best practices. I'm here also to share some trials and tribulations that I've been experiencing with my clients. So 20 plus years ago, I had the blessing to retire as the cabinet secretary for technology for the state of California. I worked with Gray Davis, and we got a ton done. So we got work like the Y2K done. We worked on applications that were user-friendly to the community. So we created the online DMV registration online. I don't know if you ever used it, but if you don't like to go do the DMV, you want to go online. I started those programs over 20 years ago, so I'm excited about leaving a positive legacy relative to that. Since then, immediately I had the opportunity to work with then Willie Bobo Brown, and I had been offered to be the city and county CIO for San Francisco. My wife says, no, we're going home. So so I ended up going back to Southern California. I hailed out of Chino Hills. That was my community. And had the blessing to go back and focus on small to medium cities and municipalities, and focus on disadvantaged communities and Native American groups. That was really my commitment and focus, to give back to the community. I had the blessing again to say that I had a great retirement, I had a great career, and I continued my career in the area of giving back to the community. My focus then was trying to close the digital divide, doing a model of broadband Wi-Fi to interconnect the communities. And I started, way back 21 years ago, and keep working on it, and I've had some great successes that I'll share briefly with you today. The other thing is, I had the privilege to be raised as a farm worker, so my family, we're up and down the state, so I kind of recognize the state. I drove up here from Riverside yesterday, so I recognized, I had a little PTSD sometime when I saw all the hard workers in the fields. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was out there at 8 years old helping the family, right? So we had that experience, and had the blessing through affirmative action to attend USC. I studied architecture, and had the blessing from there to get heavily into technology with computer-aided design. I taught computer-aided design to architects and engineers. And so that career path led me to where I'm at today. And a lot of what I've experienced was focusing on giving back to the community through technology, through now energy generation and energy conservation. And then about 6 years ago, I had a friend of mine that was the director of homelessness for city of Riverside. And he called me in. He said, hey, Eli, we're having this big challenge. We got 2,500 people plus in the river. We're trying to house them. We're trying to deal with the matter. And we really need some out of the box thinking ideas. So we talked about it. We sat down, and I designed a concept of emergency transition housing. And so we got all excited and put it together. He submitted for a grant. We got $3 million from the state to initiate the program. And then they changed leadership, and the new person leading came in and then allocated the money to tents. And the sad thing is, like 9 months ago, I got a call back and say, hey, looks like we have to rebuild our program again and go after another grant. And I go, really? Why? What happened? Because, well, some of the people in the tents were burning them down. And so I did research immediately on it, and sure enough, it was a major problem. So they had to take down that whole tent, component that they established because of the danger to all the other temporary residents. So again, those are examples of being in the mix and being involved from the consulting side, from the private sector side. But my experience in government allowed me to understand how to help municipalities. So understanding the process, the procurement, the planning, the grant writing, all of the components that come with getting a good program in place for the municipality. I've had experience and was able to share that experience. And so in preparing for today, the big topic related to housing is really fundamental universal problem in the United States. It's not just rural communities, it's not just poor communities, it's across the whole country. And I had the blessing to meet with a partner of mine in Taiwan, and I was there like 3 months ago, and I looked at the community and I couldn't find one homeless person. And I didn't understand why. I was like, how does this happen, right? How does this occur? And so they have a different program, they have a different structure, and they have a full commitment to their elderly and to people that are, in need. So you come back home and you see the homelessness, in San Francisco, San Diego. I mean, it's all over. It's not a common only to one neighborhood or one type of economic level of neighborhood. And when I was in Chino Hills prior to coming up to Sacramento, my daughter would have friends all over. This was about 10 years ago, way back in 2010. It reminded me of, obviously we had the housing crash in 2008, 2010. It got really worse, and kids were couch surfing even then. So this problem started with the housing problem, and then it increased and it grew. And then with COVID, it really complicated even further. So one of the challenges that all communities have is to really try to provide their services, and with limited funding and limited resources, it's very difficult to provide the services that are needed. So the thing is do the best with what you have. And so what I've done is I built a team together to help my clients, and we'll be going over kind of our trials and tribulations of what we try to do in Imperial County. We started helping them out like 3 years ago, and we started working with housing concepts and how they could establish a housing program. They've been blessed by having what's now called the Lithium Valley, or the White Gold, and so they're looking to expand in the next few years to 10,000 plus jobs, where they'll start the jobs. You mentioned jobs as a big issue. They'll start at $30 an hour for entry-level jobs, which is pretty good, actually. But if you look at Imperial County, it's about 175,000 population. So getting 10,000 minors from where it's another challenge that community is going to have, because the population is not there for that workforce to be increased so quick. So going back to the matter, then we're talking about homelessness, and I was introduced to your team, the Latino Coalition of the County of San Benito, by Joe Cotto, who's the chairman of the 200. So if you don't mind, I'd like to let Joe do a quick sort of introduction of what he's been doing and the work that he's been doing with the 200, which is totally related to what we're talking about today. Joe?
Yes, thank you. Yes, very much. Elias wanted me to share with you a few thoughts about the 200 and what we've been up to. The organization was started uh, by Cruz Reynoso and Herman Gallegos and John Gamboa, who was the president of Greenlining at the time. And the focus has always been on home ownership, eliminating poverty through home ownership. And what we have been doing over the last several years is that we have conducted sessions kind of like you're involved with right now, conducted sessions in San Bernardino, in Riverside, in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in Sacramento, and in Fresno, bringing local residents to address the whole issue of of housing, but more importantly, in terms of home ownership, because we believe that the elimination of poverty will happen through home ownership. So it's a pleasure for me to join all of you today, and particularly with Elias Cortez and Daryl and the rest of the specialists. And it's what it's going to take is leadership. It's going to take the ability to work together with people who have the same objectives and the same vision. And in our case, our vision is home ownership, the idea where everyone will be able to afford and own their own home and build wealth and accumulate and ensure the security of their families. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's also good to see Nora Campos, of course, my former kind of colleague who followed me in the state legislature. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Um, Joe obviously Joe obviously has had previous experience in the legislature. He's a great leader, and one of the things that the group, the 200, has done and could help your organization is they've been leading quite a few of the housing bills, and they've been involved. They have an attorney that's full-time focused on these bills to get them through the legislative process. And a lot of the bills that are coming out right now, the 200 was directly involved with in assisting the legislator and focusing on the challenges that we have forward. So as today, as we speak in California, there's 160,000 people in California that are homeless. It impacts people from all walks of life. People are living paycheck to paycheck in many cases. So any incident, whether it's an accident or a work-related problem, puts these people into a homeless situation immediately. And so that's really the challenge that we're seeing. So the waves that occurred from 2008 to 2010 continued with COVID, and currently the financial crisis that people are experiencing at the worker level. Many of them that were considered essential workers and had to come to work and actually didn't get paid a lot, but actually were working to keep businesses open, to keep food at our table, to keep housing being built. Whatever programs are available, essential workers have been delivered, but they are the group that's commonly looked at as it relates to the vulnerability of their lifestyle, of their living, of their families. So that group basically, again, when I saw my daughter 10 years ago, her friends, I'd come downstairs down the house and I'd see kids lying around on the floor. I'm like, that's my daughter. Who's that? Who's this? Who's that? They're all students. They're all kids within the neighborhood. I'm talking about Chino Hills. And Chino Hills is an uppity community. And so how can that be in my mind? I was figuring out, like, well, how could that be? Right? So that means that the challenge that we have is pervasive. It's not focused only on one community. It's not focused only in an area. It's basically all around us at different levels. So one of the programs that we felt, again, in working with Joe Cotto and the 200, is to focus on not only creating legislation, but I think a quicker way to get things done is to work with the legislators through the budget process. And so if you have ideas from programs, and let me give you some examples of a program. So right now there's housing programs at the USDA level, the federal level, that are in the hundreds of millions and are being allocated. And so the IRA Act, which has billions of dollars, there's a program called Justice 40. How many have heard of Justice 40? Okay, no one. So that's my point, is they're creating federal programs and no one knows about it. Justice 40 means that 40% of that huge $1 billion of investment will be allocated to communities like yourself, disadvantaged and rural communities. So it's guaranteed that that funding will come to your communities. So knowing that it's coming, having a plan ready is mission critical. So you have to start planning now so that when the funds get to the state and become available to your municipalities, if you don't have what they call a shovel-ready plan, it's very difficult to get allocated those fundings. So a lot of people are told, oh, well, you got to have a shovel-ready plan, right? And people are asking, like, what's a shovel-ready plan look like? Well, that means that you have to have conceived the idea, put a plan together, put a strategy together, hired engineers and architects and what you need to make that a shovel-ready plan. So if you're not there today, you're already behind the ball in a sense. And the other challenge that I've felt with many state entities, the other example, perfect example, is the broadband. There's a $2 billion broadband program, and they have the first phase, and then the second phase is what they call the middle mile, which means they're going to put fiber on all your highways. And then the third phase is what they call the last mile. Well, that's the opportunity for your city, your county, your communities, community-based organizations, Native Americans, to put in their shovel-ready plans to ask for the money. The sad thing is, a first come, first serve, number one. Second challenge is that those fundings are set up for you to have a plan ready to go. And they're looked at from a regional perspective. So they want you to collaborate with the city and the county and a community-based organization. That needs to be part of your plan. The other part of the plan is it has to have, added value to that whole community as a region, not only as one entity. And so those are things that we looked at, and then our concern was, and we talked to the legislators, that all these monies are available, but who's there to help the little city, the small community-based organization engineer those plans? So there's not a lot of technical funding available, which should have been part of the program, right? So there's solutions that are coming out, but if you're not progressive and out there getting ahead of the curve and getting attached to these programs, I think, Nora, you had mentioned that one of the counties just approved a program for the housing for farm workers, right? So Nora will share with us.
I was just sharing that Santa Clara County had a press conference, and they have secured through Measure A, which was a bond, that $34 million is going to be designated just for farm worker housing in Santa Clara. So as we've been talking earlier, there is a movement for the need to create housing for farm workers. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. That's very important, and that's another example. Is a neighbor county here now has a project that got approved. So it's okay for you guys as a county neighbor and go there and cut and paste what their plan is and try to figure out who they got the funding from, right? And you're halfway with your shovel-ready plan. And so those are the kind of things that I'm always talking to different municipalities about, how you get to that finish line sooner. You don't always have to start from scratch. You can find partners that are in your space that can help you get there. Historically, one of the partners in Southern California was Telecu. Telecu was building housing for seniors and low income for decades now. And Daryl will be speaking today, and he's from that organization. And again, the past experience matters. There's local entities here that we'll be introducing your team to, that past experience in getting these grants, in actually building housing for the needy, is part of what they do. And so looking out to partner with those entities is a mission critical point. The next point that, with all due respect, I want to get into is the public policy. Part of what you shared as a planning director, you're submitting the plans and the housing plans and what have you, and I'm sure you could use more staff to help you get over the hump and have a really solid plan. So those are opportunities again for you to collaborate with other counties that already are doing it, probably have resources to do it. And so one of the things I always recommend is partner with other local neighboring municipalities, whether it's a county or a city. There's other entities going through the same work effort that you're doing, and if you guys maybe created a collaborative effort, then you could as a team get there faster, because now you're sharing ideas, best practices amongst a larger group. And then obviously bringing that back home and customizing it to your community, to your needs in here in San Benito. So the main point that I believe is that the more educated the public policymakers are, the more information you bring to your leadership from the staff side, the better off you'll have as an outcome of what you're producing. And so again, state legislators, county supervisors, we're all 100%. I don't know any leader that is not dealing with homelessness today. So going out and reaching out and partnering with those that are in the space, that already have the plans, just like your neighboring county just approved the program in the exact program that we're talking about is housing farm workers. That's your best practice for right now. Let's go look at that plan and let's go see how then we can adjust it to your own neighborhood, to your community. And so I've always been involved with reaching out to the policymakers, the council members, the mayors, the supervisors, and there's organizations that meet, California League of Cities, there's NACO, the National Association of Counties, there's California Contract Cities, there's independent cities. So I heavily involve myself in those areas because I'm always trying to educate my clients through best practices that they share amongst themselves, and or I might find a new technology that they are not aware of, and we'll discuss one today. So again, I don't know, is Jesus on the line? Jesus is the city manager of the city of Norwalk. He's been extremely progressive. I followed him for the last 12 years. I worked with the city of El Monte. Jesus worked there and created a $2 billion portfolio of economic development for city of El Monte, which is a disadvantaged community. And then he took that leadership role and then moved to city of Norwalk and has been building the same program. So he had his own best practice, and now he's taking it to the next city. And if any of the cities or counties want to learn from people like him, he's always been readily available to share his vision and his methodology on how he's getting projects approved. And a lot of what he does is he proactively reaches out and works with developers, and with his council, they're very in unison about the objectives and the policy decisions from council, that he then goes out and brings the best partners to the city, to the municipality, and they're engaged in really current and best practice opportunities to grow. So they're they already have a program that they implement in the city. It's a home key program, it's a state program, and basically it's a great program because funding comes to your city or your county, and if there's a motel or hotel that's really not used, or it's underutilized, or it's not a good situation, the city and or the county have the right to work with that owner. And even, I'm going to say a bad word, even as far as having to do what's called a friendly eminent domain. And so there's technologies and tools and funding available for the cities to really act on taking housing that's underutilized, underperforming, and to make it affordable housing. And so one of the best ways, and we'll talk about that later, is to take existing our technology, existing buildings, and make the best of those as you're building the master plan, as you're planning to build new buildings and bring new development to your community. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Yeah, we'll add that. Um, again, then we'll move on. I guess Jesus wasn't available. So the situation we're talking about, scarcity of housing. That's really the challenge that we're dealing with today, and that's basically due to a few things. So generally, it's a combination of things that are complicated, as was mentioned earlier by your planner, and the whole concept is some programs are outdated as it relates to planning and zoning. You have restrictive and or exclusionary land use, and we experienced that working with Imperial County, because the whole land use was focused on agriculture. It wasn't focused on housing. Yet they have 60,000 or so workers that cross the border every day to work in the county. So they have a moving population on top of the housing challenges that they have. So they're dealing with even more complex workforce shifts and movements, and how they're housed and where they stay, and how they live and work in Imperial County. So they're having to change their practices from water management, so sharing water with developers versus using the water for farming is a major issue. It's becoming a big issue. The Imperial Irrigation District has come up with some very progressive ideas. They basically provide all the water for Imperial County and some of it for Coachella Valley, as an example. So they have a lot of complexity and a lot of rules that they keep changing. So taking the outdated restrictive regulatory programs and looking at them again from the perspective of how you can expedite better housing solutions is a big opportunity right now. Definitely, as was mentioned, the consideration must be that the most vulnerable groups are treated as a priority for the housing. And a vulnerable group, as you brought up, the farm workers, seniors, single parent families, disabled. I mean, if you look at the situation that we had with COVID, everybody was impacted, right? And so we found a lot of things that, wow, it was tremendous. So the same empathy that we had, the same focus that we had on COVID, we actually had communities funded through the federal government, through ARPA. So there's funds dedicated to help that community become sustaining, self-sustaining. And so those funds are actually, some cases, still available, and many communities are using those funds and reallocating them to housing. So that's another program that we're looking at. Affordable housing is pretty much deemed to those with a medium or below household income. And right now, California, people that were not in a below income are now in a below income category. So the numbers of people that have become vulnerable as it relates to numbers has increased tremendously. A friend of mine sent me, they do charter school training, and they sent me a text this morning regarding homelessness in charter schools and in high schools. The sad thing is that there's been an increase of 9 to 10% of students in high schools that have become homeless since last year. So now we're looking at kids that are being directly impacted, that are couch surfing and before, as I mentioned before, in 2010, there was college kids. Now it's going down to the level of high school. And so obviously that impacts all families, right? So our goal is to deal with how do we get the most vulnerable housed. So there's state laws that are being written today and continue to be written that will be approved next year. And a lot of them are going to probably create more of a state initiative versus a local control initiative. So for many reasons, there's been a lot of challenges between what the state is doing and what the municipalities are doing. And it started with the change of how redevelopment was handled, right? We lost redevelopment on the municipality side. So for the bad choices of the few, many municipalities were negatively impacted because now their funding and their local control of their housing elements of other programs through redevelopment went away. So that now created another wave or another layer of challenges that we all have had to deal with. So one of the opportunities that the county and the city have is to create what's now called a micro unit ordinance. And basically what it does, it allows housing to be expedited, streamlining, including the funding around commuter transit systems. And so that's pretty much, I looked at your downtown, we had we had La Cantina right next to it is a empty lot. And noted on it is it's got a mixed use approval, which I think is a great deal for your downtown, right? So those are tools that you can work on now that through a micro unit ordinance, your community here can implement programs that make those projects a priority because basically you're thinking, I'm in an agriculture community, same thing with Imperial County, and in that area we were proposing to different cities to do mixed use with 4 stories high. And people were looking at us like, are you crazy? 2 stories maybe, but 4. And so here we're talking about their challenges, but they're not used to mixed use. They're not used to vertical construction, 4 or 6 or 8 stories. That's not a concept. So that's an example of, again, changing the rules and the guidelines and how you think, how you solve the problem within the old school rule model that we're in. So we have to transition our thinking and start thinking mixed use housing. A lot of the millennial generation, they don't want a picket fence in the yard. They're okay with living in a apartment style unit, and they're okay with that kind of housing. So it's really a paradigm shift that's occurred even with the demand of the whether it's a renter or a buyer. They have different insights of where they would live, and that's changing also. So we need to adjust to those changes. Going further, there's programs that are remedies now, and I'll just go over them real quick. Current state law says that if a developer can dedicate 20% of their homes, let's say it's 100 homes, and 20 of them are dedicated for low income, then their projects can be by law expedited. So that's a huge change in the way building will occur. There's also the program is tied to another program called the Builder's Remedy. So the state housing requires that cities and counties make one of 5 findings, if they do, to deny an application that makes infeasible a housing project for very low or moderate income households. Then basically, including emergency shelter, then these developers can build under these new rules. The other issue is that the HHA limits local government's ability to deny, reduce the density, or make infeasible housing development projects. So on behalf of the groups that are trying to build the housing, basically now they're on the diamond lane to build housing in all communities. And when I lived in Chino Hills, way back when and even to today, they fight this law every year, and the state sues them every year, and the state wins every year. They're one of the few communities that can afford to lose that kind of money in court every year. I think Huntington Beach and a couple others do the same. So, but again, statewide now, the housing element is in the diamond lane to build. Other programs that are changing also is in LA they did a recent study, and to build housing vertical, they're talking about $1 million per apartment to build. You're like, what? For an apartment? And that's sad because it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that case. And so again, why is it? Well, land values are high, just like your land values are high now. They're going to get higher tomorrow. So there's a major paradigm shift going on with the work from home from the tech industry. And guess what? This is a nice home to be in your Hollister city. It's a beautiful place to be. So you're going to get transition of workers to this valley and further south. It's just going to keep growing. Why? Because it's affordable and it's a beautiful community. So you already have the demand coming this way. And so planning for that demand with solutions such as mixed use and getting the funding in place, you're going to be dealing with clients that are already used to living in San Francisco and high density housing. So to them to come out here in a 4-story, 6-story mixed use unit, it's not going to be a big issue. They're not going to be looking for a picket fence. They're going to be okay with that kind of housing. So that paradigm is going to shift too, and the municipalities here have to think a little different about how they can, house those groups. So you're going to actually be bringing in and raising your income level of many of these workers because they do very good financially where they're at. The other challenge that I think you need to look at both locally, regionally, and statewide is that the state has committed on the what they call the Pro Housing Designation Program. They committed at the 2019-2020 Budget Act that they were going to focus on building housing, and their goal was to build 2.5 million homes by 2030. I assure you we're behind schedule, right? From the funding, from the actual building, and from getting to how we're going to achieve that goal, we're definitely behind schedule. So that's why you're seeing a lot of pressure on state legislation that's really going to override local control relative to housing. And so the sooner the cities get their plans done, the more ability they'll have to maintain control of how buildings and how housing will be built in your community. The Solutions Act, Assembly Bill 68, is out there, and that helps deal with California's housing crisis and reduce climate change. So now you're dealing with climate change. Housing policy, again, is climate policy per Hanlon, who got Senate Bill 423 approved. Again, a lot of these bills, there's Senator Scott Wiener who's writing bills. So a lot of these bills are housing focused, but they're more, how can I say, progressive than some local communities are ready for. So that's why I said we got to start with the planning from the local community, because the state's driving its initiatives too. And if you don't plan ahead, then the state's initiatives will override your local initiatives, and having local control matters. There's bills coming out to soften CEQA. It's the hardest thing that any developer will experience is getting approvals for CEQA. So CEQA reform is coming, and it's being worked through legislation as we speak through Assembly Bill 1683. You have additional bonuses for very low and moderate income in housing. That's Assembly Bill 1287. You have Senate Bill 747 to scale back the Surplus Land Act. You have Senate Bill 684 which allows kind of like an over-the-counter approval of 10 units. So, you know, again, that's an example of having local plan better lining up with the state plan. Assembly Bill 1218, replacement of housing and relocation benefits. And as you know, the accessory dwelling unit law, the ADU law, keeps changing every year. It keeps changing. And so you might have a home that's big enough to support a house and 3 ADUs. So there's a lot of, how can I say, shifting going on. And a lot of those laws are going to be more and more strict as they come to your communities. So being prepared is critical. Next, we want to talk a little bit about how we fund these projects. So there's a lot of creative financing opportunities. Right now, you know, the banks are not really lending on housing development projects. It's very hard to get low interest money for housing development like it was a few years ago. So right now you're looking at 10, 12+% on money to build, which kind of goes back to that, why is it $1 million an apartment unit in LA being built? Because 10% of it is the fee that you have to pay the bank to borrow that money to build, right? So what are other solutions and alternatives? And we'll discuss that. I have a gentleman named Edgar Morales on the line. Is he on the line? Okay. So Edgar helped us help entities in Imperial County. So the good news. Edgar Morales is the person. So Edgar is an expert in financing projects. So financing in your community, it's rural. So they know how to structure rural loans. So you could, in a development here in your community, finance 70% USDA, 20% PACE, and then 10% would be your investment from the developer slash community-based organization who wants to build. So what that does, it actually gives you a good pathway. It's kind of a diamond link in comparison of getting hard money loan. And the hard money loan impacts you long term, and it also impacts you on what people call pre-development costs and or construction loan, which is a short-term 2-year loan typically. So with that impact, you need to look for options. And so there's a group called Synergy Community Development Group that we were working with down there, and in the presentation we'll have all these contacts for you. Synergy Community Development Group is a specialty nonprofit that 100% of what they do is to build low-income housing. And they know the financing, they know the paperwork to fill out, they'll even manage the units if those units are rental units, right? So you need to partner. There's a couple up here that I'll send you referrals who could partner with you guys locally. They're Northern California based. And so they're also, the good news is Edgar's up here in Northern California too. So maybe in the follow-up discussion, I'll introduce them to you all. So financing is critical. So the best financing right now is that. There's another financing program that if your entity, the city and or the county would partner with a Native American group, there are millions and millions of dollars set aside for Native American communities to build housing. So let's say there was a out-of-the-box planning where a Native American community would partner with the city and or the county to build farm worker housing. That could be done. That's realistic. And they have loans and grants. So you could borrow a loan at 1% versus 12%. And or they have grants. The grants are competitive, so you'll compete against other tribes for the funding. And typically, they had like 78 million last year. I think only 20 million was allocated. So there's money there. So if you have proactive relationships with any Native American entities in this region, then that would be a very good partner so that it's a win-win. They get to build on their land, they get value for the land, and then guess what? Your city and your county deal with the challenge of meeting your housing demand. And I don't say the word demands lightly. Demands are very, very strict from the state relative to housing requirements. So in the past few years, they were not, how can I say, patrolling it as much, but now they are. So that is another example of how you could creatively work to fund housing today under today's tough financial situation. So one of the key things that we found out in Imperial County is it gets super hot and it gets super cold. And they do have earthquakes like we have up here, and there's a lot of similarities of the two communities. The only major difference I see is your land value is way, way, way higher than them. In Imperial County, it's very difficult to find what they call comparable real estate, comps, they call it. So to invest and build housing at the scale we were looking at for those 10,000 workers, it's a big climb. In your community, you can work with landowners that don't know what to do with their land or maybe don't want to farm anymore. They could convert those lands and subordinate to a construction loan with the city, the county, and the tribe or other community-based organizations. So your community-based organization could partner with them, and they would subordinate to a construction loan on that property, and they would become a partner with you. But again, that's another creative way to get financing for your projects. In the way we build housing, I'm going to have Daryl Salceda, one of our partners that has extensive experience. Again, he comes from Telecu. He has a ton of experience in building senior housing and affordable housing. And one of the things him and I have been doing for the last 7 years is researching a best practice in how we build. And so if you don't mind, I'll have Daryl speak to that in a second.
Daryl, you've been unmuted, or you've been given permissions to speak. You can unmute yourself and start talking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So anyways, I apologize. I was really hoping to make this trip in person, but I had some personal issues come up that didn't allow me to travel this week. So as Eli shared with you, I do have experience working for Telecu, building their senior housing. I also was in charge of doing all their construction work on the schools and also the residential housing, not only doing the performance, but constructing residential housing for rent. Also, in the late 90s and early 20s, early 2000s, I was asked by Chicano Palacaos in Arizona to put together a affordable housing thing for them that kind of imitated the Telecu model, which we were very successful doing. So I'm not a developer. I'm a general contractor. I've been licensed since 1993, and starting my own company after I left Telecu in the early 2000s. I have graduated a couple of federal programs. I was an 80 contractor working all over the country for the federal government. Um, we finally graduated, and now I've been doing work for municipalities, for local government as well, and utilities. So the type of construction, I don't know if Eli has a sample of it that you could take a look at. So what it is as Eli shared with you, for the last 4 to 5 years, we've been traveling Southern California and beyond up into DF and Mexico, looking at plants of this new type of construction that they've been using since the 1992 when the Carter administration, when he was building for Habitat for Humanity, we're looking for housing that would be sustainable. Now, in looking in understanding, housing like I do, is what makes it affordable. And Conventional construction, which I built with wood, metal, and prefabricated. So we've landed on this new type of type 1 building product that makes it sustainable because the interiors no longer have to use drywall that's going to rot out or it's going to um, deteriorate. Um, the floors are now pure concrete as well that you can polish out. So therefore, if you have any type of of respiratory problems and stuff like that, you no longer have this. The wall system is basically created of a high density panel in the center that's wrapped with wire. This wire is what makes it able for the concrete scratch and brown coat to stick onto this panel that you can go 3 stories high with this system. So um, we've eliminated having to paint the walls because now the interior now will be more like an Italian finish on it, so that the concrete now will turn into like an old plaster house. Those of you that are old enough to know that the houses back in the 40s were also made of this type of construction on the inside, but they were called plaster homes. Um, these type of construction has been mostly used for commercial buildings. In Palm Desert, Palm Springs, the LG Steakhouse and other very expensive looking um, chop houses has also been um, a part have been using this technology for 4 decades and beyond. Um, Again, we are now using this material up in the San Diego, Riverside, Palm Springs area, and soon we will have another model in the desert area of Calipatria. We're looking to do something like that. The whole thing was is that we were interested in building this type of homes to bring sustainable, something that would be earthquake proof, something that would be fireproof. Um, Something that would be energy efficient. We've done load calcs on these units and they're using 60% less electricity than conventional construction. That would be metal stud, wood, or any other type of construction because of the way these things are built with concrete inside and outside. And the way the roof systems are put on there, it's all a monolithic pour. So I don't know if Eli brought a little video of what we've been showing, but I'm sure that he could share it with whoever's interested in looking at it. But I know that on my as a presenter, it showed that I'm the chairman of the Workforce Development Board for LA County. I also chair the LA Latino Chamber of Commerce. So my purpose is to be a servant leader, and with my experience, I want to bring quality of life to hardworking families that deserve home ownership. And how do we make them affordable? You make them affordable by not having to invest any more money in maintaining these homes. And we could sit here, we could probably tell you that these houses will go 50 years without any type of maintenance upgrade and beyond. I know my presentation was short, right?
Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, we do have the kit here on the table. We're sharing the demonstration unit, so we'll probably have questions later on. Thank you. So the other area we want to make sure we shared with you is that how does a project get done? And there's like basically 10 steps that we're laying out. Number one, select a site, get site control, so you can do a offer to buy a property with X number of days, so you can do your due diligence, and once your due diligence is done, then you can enact on procuring the property. So you can do a lease with option to buy. You can make an offer to give you 90 days to do your due diligence and then buy then. So there's different ways to get site control. With the site control, then you have the authority to talk to the utilities, talk to the building and safety, and represent that property as it relates to what your proposed development is going to look like. Always, always, always check with local, regional, and state laws, building codes, planning, zoning, everything's continuously changing. So you need to continuously communicate with all these entities at every level. So if you're going to build housing and it's going to be affordable housing, guess what? You have to deal with the federal HUD guidelines. You have state uniform building codes. You have local city and county codes. You have local city and county planning. So you really have to kind of make sure that you check all the boxes, if you will, of what your project will be successfully approved to proceed to build. So regulatory processes are mission critical. Um, Basically, the next step would be conducting your financial feasibility analysis. And again, working with the gentleman Edgar with USDA and others that have that professional experience, you build what's called a pro forma. Pro forma is kind of like a budget for construction, a budget for what you're going to build, and how you're going to be able to complete this project. Um, that's your financial analysis. Then you go into starting your application. So if you don't have water, you can't build. If you don't have power, you can't build. If you don't have waste treatment, you can't build. Now, there are technologies that allow you to build on a small scale, maybe an ADU, that you could have self-sustaining components and not need to be directly connected to the grid. But when you talk about housing, 2, 3 stories, what have you, you got to have all those major, what's called entitlements. Will serve letters is the official name for them. So you got to have a will serve letter for water, for power, and for water treatment. On the line we have Joe from AWP Energy. Joe is a very progressive CEO, and he's dealing with an entity that deals with water, power, and other related utilities. I want to invite Joe to speak a little bit about kind of how you help out a community, Joe, relative to providing them the validation that there's ample and readily available water, power, and waste treatment, and if there's not, you have technology solutions to offer. So, Joe?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present to everyone today, so thank you. As Eli introduced us, we're a company that builds green infrastructure, and in particular, it's water, wastewater, and power generation. So in the case of a city that has water available and they'll serve it to you, that's great. Most likely it will be municipal scale water, meets all of the criteria for potability, but that's not always the case. And that would be the same with sewer and waste. You can have septic up to a certain number of homes, but beyond that, you need to have an actual wastewater treatment plant. In many cases, that's a municipal system. We've developed what's called an above ground package wastewater treatment plant, which for all intents and purposes is a municipal scale wastewater treatment plant, but it can be implemented on a 60-foot by 60-foot pad, as an example, and clean 50,000 gallons of waste product a day. And then power, it's great if the area that you're in has power that can be delivered to the land and the development that you want to build upon. And if they don't, then you have to come up with an alternative solution, which would be known as a microgrid. And there we could build a system that might be solar, could be natural gas or diesel generator systems, depending on what it is and where it is. And then you can build power generation for that community. So we specialize in all of those areas, and we have a lot of experience in building workforce housing in Texas. And there's some similarities in the sense that if you think of the oil and gas industry that's up in northern Texas by New Mexico, there's just a massive amount of work going on, but there's no infrastructure out there. So they actually have to build small cities, which includes housing, water, wastewater, and power. And we build those units for those types of communities. But there is a process, as Eli indicated. First thing we got to find out is the land that you'd like to build on, does it have the infrastructure available? And if it doesn't, then what is missing and how can we bring our technologies or other technologies that are available to serve your community to build the houses at an affordable and sustainable in methods. So that's what we do.
So one of the things Joe is probably being shy. He has a technology that I call it water cleaning technology. So we have cities that have forever chemicals, poison chemicals in their aquifers. Joe has a technology that actually will clean that out and allow polluted water to become potable, drinkable water. So there's some very progressive technology that Joe has in place in partner with my other colleague, Alfredo, who does projects in the area of water. So they have water cleaning technologies that will clean the chlorinated pools, like we have a public swimming pool. There's chlorine that's bad for the kids, especially if they have asthma. So basically you use a cleaning water technology to clean that pool. There's other components that his technologies that he has access to that would bring to a project. So in your case, you got rural land, you're going to need infrastructure out there. So there's a whole new program coming up. PG&E is part of it, where the city or the county can build their own microgrids. And so that's really a critical resource that we have on our team to share with your program.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Eli. So thank you for adding it to it. So as an example, polluted wells are a real common problem, particularly when you look at farming agricultural communities, and the wells become contaminated with fertilizer runoff, nitrates and things like that. That's something that we know how to do. Pretty much any water contamination, we know how to deal with that. And as one example, in a town in Texas called Hebronville outside of Laredo, they had unacceptable levels of arsenic, and we developed a system. In fact, it starts up next week, and will remove all of the arsenic. And oftentimes, when you have arsenic, you have iron. So as Eli mentioned, if you have polluted wells, there's a good chance we would be able to clean those wells through proper technology and filtration that brings water that might be right at your development. Because if you have to bring it from a city, sometimes it could be very expensive. I mean, as an example, if you want to take a 6-inch water pipe, it could be $100 a foot. If you had to build a 60-inch pipeline, it could be $2 million a mile. So what we're trying to do is look at what resources available and then the condition of that resource, and then we'll be able to mitigate that so you can take advantage of nearby close infrastructure pieces like water and wastewater. Thank you for that, Eli.
So one of the key things that I want to go over is a checklist for the city and for the county team. And basically, if you looked at the trials and tribulations that we've been experiencing and helping Imperial County and different cities down there, we kind of made it a checklist. So we'll send you an email on this checklist. You have it. You don't have to take notes all the time. But some of the major ones that are best practices to manage and to prepare for is, one, you have some major demographic and behavioral factors. A lot of it has to do with cultural, and a lot of it has to do with basically economic access to programs, to education, or what have you. So you have chronic homelessness. You have the emergency problem now with the workforce being homeless, and then there's other pandemics that are coming that we're gonna have to prepare for beyond COVID, right? So those are things that you have to kind of plan for. Migration occurs quite a bit in cities nowadays, so you're going to see migration from San Francisco coming our way, and so those kind of things are very important to start planning to figure out. Okay, what is that going to create? Well, it's known that that's a concern for gentrification, right? Communities are getting shifted culturally by people in opposite spectrums of the financial spectrum. And so those are things that are going to impact your community. Dealing with, it used to be a challenge to deal with increased life expectancy, but now it's reversing. So now we're living less. And why? Because we don't have fresh air. We don't have fresh water. So all the things that were basic to us now are being impacted and become our lifestyle. And now we're having less days of living because of those challenges. So cleaning up your rivers, cleaning up the air, embracing technologies such as fast chargers and green technologies and green building. It's a state law. You can't use gas to build apartment units anymore. You have to use electricity. So all these changes are coming your way. And so your building codes and your planning codes and your zoning codes need to adapt. So it's kind of like you're going to have to become more malleable because of all these changes and they're coming so fast. So that's an area that we recommend that you're continuously looking at to adapt. A greater propensity for people to live alone. And what does that mean? That means where are the wraparound services for those residents? Can we group them? So what does grouping them in a space do? Well, in one side, you need less parking spaces to build more units, which is a positive thing. On the opposite is you got to have transit. These spaces have to be near transit. People want to move around still, so these are challenges that you want to plan for. Again, you have young adults delaying buying. So who's going to buy the home I want to sell in 10 years, right? So things like that are impacting both sides of the spectrum. So I'm with the baby boomers. I'm trying to retire. I haven't retired for 20 years, right? I'm trying to retire still. So I'm working on it. Again, exclusionary zoning is probably the biggest impact, and regulatory zoning is the biggest impact to fast growth. So I have the last person that to speak to you, and this is all great news because my friend William works for U.S. Bank. In this county, this community has special financing for house purchases. So I'm going to let William join us real quick and briefly go over his program. We also have Jesus, our city manager, that's going to talk to you from the city side of how hard he's been working with his council coming up. So after William, we'll have the Honorable Jesus Gomez from the city of Norwalk, city manager, who has a ton of experience in everything we talked about today. William?
All right, can you guys hear me there?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, thank you, Eli, for inviting me to this session, and it's an honor to be with the representatives for San Benito County. And one of the factors, the very important factors of a particular county of San Benito is their eligibility for GSFA, which is the Golden State Finance Agency product. That is one of the ones that U.S. Bank and myself have been working to promote in these areas where customers or potential buyers could get up to 5.5% down payment assistance on their homes. Not only that, but most important, they could layer it with a one of our programs that is called the American Dream. That American Dream give you a grant, not something you have to pay back, of up to 12,500 plus an additional $5,000 in closing costs. These programs could be layered down with these options. Another great product that is available for San Benito is also the College FA product, the USDA product. And on that one as well, they could get up to 5% down payment assistance program. That is a deferred interest, deferred payment. It does get triggered for payment upon refinance or sale of the property. These programs have been combined also with the American Dream from U.S. Bank that could give the 12,500 and the $5,000. Most important, we've done some homework together with Eli to determine that the entire, almost, and I want to say that we have to check it by address, but most of the county of San Benito qualifies for these kind of products. So because of the low to moderate income areas that they have out there. I provided some of the flyers that are from the Golden State that's being displayed as well. That gives you, kind of like the guideline of the programs, and you can see there the GSFA Platinum program that has the USDA guaranteed home loan as well for that type of financing as well. So we're pretty excited that these programs have been created, particularly for these areas. There's a second flyer that I have provided, programs that are available. So these are available through us, through US Bank, and in partnership with Eli, we'll be more than happy to provide more information as is needed, or as it becomes readily available. Any upgrades or so, we'd be more than happy to provide it over to you, so that we could make this a successful partnership as well. So thank you, Eli, for having me. And my information could be readily available to any of you. That was the map, and it's the dream that we're here to help. The GSFA program, which provides the gap, the map of the areas that are covered. Thank you again.
Is that there's programs today in this community for help with buying not just a first time home buyer, but you can be buying your second home with this financing. So this community is one of the communities that qualified. It's a rural community, and you have income both opportunities from the state and from the federal USDA. So again, getting the information that we're going to share with you, you'll have the flyers, and getting the word out is critical. And getting the word out from the city, from the county to your community is mission critical to get people housed, and to maybe if you have a family that's already housed and they improve their housing through this financing, they're able then to rent the other housing for people that are looking for housing. ADU financing is available. They restarted that program. You can have your first $40,000 towards building an ADU. I'm working with a manufacturer in Pomona that I can get an ADU with a bathroom, a kitchenette at $40,000. Now in Imperial County, they paid for a unit like that. They paid $150,000. So with prefabrication technology that exists today, basically we could buy 3 units up here for what they paid down there for student housing, 1 unit, and our unit has more square footage. So there's other solutions. So we're talking about multi-family housing. We're talking about mixed-use housing. We're talking about ADU housing, a housing in your backyard where you could rent. And if you're a homeowner and you want additional sustainability long-term, that rental income helps you too. So there's a lot of ways of programs coming out. And so we have Jesus Gomez on the line again. He's been extremely helpful in developing his community, city of Alamani. I think he left and created a $2 billion portfolio there, and he's already passing up his, with City of Norwalk, $1 billion economic development proposal from different entities, and housing demands are included in his economic development plan. So, Jesus, can you share with us your vision?
Sure. Good afternoon, Eli, and those that are part of this call. I'm honored to be part of the call, and one of the main objectives as a city manager that I have implemented is uh, really putting together an economic development plan first, with strategic planning from the elected officials, the city council, in this case, supervisors, to be able to focus in the areas that are most needed to be redeveloped, either with housing or retail and or other type of development. And the the goal is always to have everyone understand where the development should occur, where the focus should be for the electeds and for staff, so that um, the energy and synergy can be focused, and be able to recruit the development community, so that when the electeds and or the staff approach developers, that they're all on the same page, that there isn't um, major disagreements when they come to the city. So you want to vet that out before the recruitment of developers happens. um, I'm happy to help in any way to develop, to introduce developers or introduce financing options. The two things that are really critical for development are the financing and what the government powers are, which is zoning, to be able to zone properties that are specifically uh, uh, of what you want to see there, so that the developers understand um, what they're getting into, per se. So if there's anything, Eli, that you want me to cover in specifics, I can uh, approach that topic.
Jesus, yes, thank you, Jesus. For everybody in the room, I'm sure there's going to be a few questions. For all you guys on the Zoom, please hang in there for a couple of questions. And I'm sure you guys have some great answers. So we'll open it up for Q&A now.
And for those in Zoom, just raise your hand if you would like to answer a question. We're going to get through comments in the chambers first.
So Eli, thank you. This was very informative, and I impressed that we have a nice group of individuals here and on Zoom interested in this subject. There was a lot of dialogue, and I want to thank the supervisor for opening up the chamber for us to have this important dialogue for the Latino Caucus, Latino Coalition, to be able to have this dialogue. So at this point, we're going to open it up. Just raise your hand and say your first name, and then you can ask the question. Are there any questions? Anyone have any question in the audience at this time? Yes, I'm going to hand it to you.
So, Eli, when you were talking about funding that is available for Native American entities, is that federally recognized entities?
Yeah,
only?
typically the funding has federally recognized, but tribes that are state recognized can also apply for grants. Obviously, there's different categories of grants. So the experience I have is that there's always more money and less applicants for Native American funding. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars that are available today. I'll give you an example. I'm working with a broadband project. If you in the Native American group would like to have a broadband project, there's funding set aside. I mean, it's not even, you don't have to compete for it. There's also solar energy generation funds available today. An entity, Native American entity, can apply for a minimum $3 million set aside fund. So there's set aside funds. There's no matching requirements of funds, so it's basically available funds to do projects. And again, my idea was to have the city and or the county partner with any local Native American groups and to jointly build housing either on that land or on county land, and they can use the state funds that are readily available to move on projects.
I had a question. When you were talking about educating public policymakers, there seems to be a lot of competition for individuals to buy homes because, somebody like Amazon owner is starting a fund to buy homes, and they're competing against individuals who want to buy a home, and hedge funds are buying homes by the 100,000, and that's something that our policy is that we give all these benefits, tax benefits, to these big corporations to buy homes when the individual is having a hard time trying to buy a home. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, so we experienced that in Imperial County. We saw a developer who currently has accumulated 2,500 homes. So everybody thought he was going to build them to sell them, but actually he's building them to rent them, kind of like what the Wall Street entities that you're talking about do. What can be done, though, is there's also funds with income tax credit for people who are investors that can be allocated to a housing development. So the entity could be the county, it could be the city, it could be the Native American group, or it could be a combination of thereof. and they could partner with investment tax credit groups. I have one, for example, that came to us on fast chargers, which are very hard to get. Each fast charger you'll port might run around 150,000 per charger. Plus, you have to have electricity to run it, right? So that program came to us, and they're asking us that they got approved to put fast chargers in disadvantaged or rural communities. So guess what? You would be perfect client for that. So we would work with you, the county, the city, and or the tribe to find a site and locate that solution. Again, just like they get tax credits to buy the properties, there are other entities that get tax credits to work with you to build programs, housing, fast chargers, and others. So there's both sides to that coin.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Hi, Alice. My name is Matt Huerta. I'm an affordable housing consultant. I work with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership here in the Tri-County area. Pleased to be here. And so it's just, you put a lot on the table in terms of your vast experience and the team that you brought here. Really appreciate that. It's great to see it all, kind of all the connections and everything. Housing is a very dynamic situation here, and we know how important it is for the community that we make progress going forward. I just feel like, it's a combination of identifying the sites, just as was mentioned earlier by our Abram, and the planning staff need to get that right. The county and the cities need to come together to identify, adequate, real sites, right, that the state signs off on. That's like the first major big thing. And then the funding has to line up. And, I think Nora mentioned earlier that County of Santa Clara has, a few years ago they approved $950 million. They're pretty much spent that now, but maybe they've carved some out for other populations like farm workers. I think that kind of activity is really important for the city and the county, right, to hear, is because just kind of what you were saying earlier, there's a lot of requirements to get the state or federal or investment dollars. One of the main things is, aside from having a site that works, right, that has infrastructure, that is appropriate, all those things, you're not going to be able to compete for the state or federal dollars unless you have local match, unless you have some kind of local funding sources. So sometimes it doesn't have to be a huge piece of the pie. There's ways to do that. We have really strong nonprofits here in the region that have experience developing housing that can partner with folks such as yourselves or others to help make these projects go forward. But I just want to make sure that we continue to uplift the need for the leadership here to help find ways to make sure that the policies that the housing element outlines that says, okay, all these great things that we need to have happen, but if we don't put any gas in the engine, it's just going to be a nice looking car that we spec out, but there's no gas.
Yeah, the other side to that is that there's a gas tank sitting right next to your car, and you just haven't put it in the tank. And what I mean by that is there's landowners right here in your own community that are willing to work with the city, work with the county, work with the Native American groups, work with community-based organizations. And if you saw and look up Taliku, and you saw what they started with and where they're at today, I was privileged and blessed to be with the original founders of Taliku. And, when I came out here as a farm worker, we as kids didn't really even know we were homeless. We were working at all the fields. We were in the back of a truck, a station wagon, you name it. And it was a rainy day. It was not a good day. But those are things that now, today, opportunities exist everywhere. And I think one of the things you can do is your tax assessor. You can reach out to communicate with your landowners, and I guarantee you there are landowners out there today that would be willing to partner with the city, willing to partner with the county, willing to partner with your Native American groups, willing to partner with community-based organizations. And basically, you have to get on offense and don't worry about defense right now. Right now, it's about offense. You got to get caught up and think out of the box. And to me, more conversations like we're having today, more information sharing, more picking up the phone and calling people and asking for help. It's pretty much the squeaky wheel, shovel-ready project, that's a squeaky wheel. You got to put some resources to go get that funding. But there are there are opportunities locally. There are people that are empathetic that will donate land or will provide land for you to fund projects. And the beauty up here versus Imperial County is your land is valuable. It can support and sustain a construction loan. So to me, I see up here you have some great opportunities before you.
Good afternoon. I truly thank you for being here and for all the wealth of information and encouragement that you brought, all the plethora of ideas. I really want to thank Mickey Luna and the Latino League for putting this together. I'm Linda Lampy, and I'm the Director of Hollister Community Outreach. We're the Food Angels, and we provide food mostly to food insecure farm workers, senior citizens, and our homeless community every day. So we're on the front lines. We see the needs. And I, too, grew up in a cotton patch in Tennessee, so I know what it was like going to work as a child in the fields, and that's why I'm so passionate. And my heart goes out to the farm workers who are working so hard to provide food for America and across the world, and yet we see the needs and the struggles, and we see it firsthand, just people that are working hard and still not able to put good nutrition on their dinner table. So that's just a really small part of what we're doing, but what I really am thankful for and hopeful for is that we can have more housing. My question is, how do we reach the hearts and minds of the people who are in such direct opposition to housing being built when we see that there's such a need? And yet we have such a huge pushback from people who are just very adamant that there is no growth or slow growth. And I know that's, more of a psychological question. How do you go about that? But it definitely needs to be a mind shift.
Actually, thank you for the work you do, the Angels work that you're doing. Thank you. And I'm going to get in trouble here, but I will let you know what I've been researching here recently since it came to my attention. And there's companies that hire the people we're talking about. So why aren't they here in this room? Why aren't they putting up their land? They own the land. They own the bulk of the land in this county. Why aren't they involved and engaged? We need to engage them because they benefit from the blood, sweat, and tears that the farm workers lay out here. They directly benefit. We benefit because we get quality food on our table. So all of us are benefiting one way or another off the backs of these laborers. Why aren't they here? That's the question that should be asked, is how do we engage with the people that are hiring these workers? And why can't we partner with them? They own a ton of land. Maybe set up a program with them where they get access to investment tax credits for building the housing, for housing the people that they hire. Well, to me, that's a way out of the box idea, but to me, those are things that I've studied recently here. And there are landowners that have precious land that could be readily available near your freeway system to build mixed-use housing or mixed-use projects to benefit the city, benefit the county.
So we have time that allows us for a couple more questions. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Eli, for being here and for providing the information. Could you speak on the economic development portion of creating affordable housing and mixed usage? A lot of the infill that California wants to see is created because there's pockets of opportunity within city jurisdictions that have been yet to be developed.
Yeah, so consider myself an entrepreneur developer. I've really got into this because of my friends who really started asking for help in homeless housing solutions and designs, and now recently I've been working with City of Calipatria, for example, as a client, and there's a motel that's not performing, probably 120 rooms, And I'd say they'd be lucky if they have 10% occupancy. So they're really underperforming, right? And so we reached out to them. There's a state home key program, which Jesus successfully implemented in his city in Norwalk. And the state will fund, it's almost like 600, 700 a week per person to be housed. And basically these units can be hotel rooms, but preferably adding kitchenettes would help, because now you can have single family parent with kids in these spaces also. So the solution is there. There's home key programs. A lot of people look at home key in a negative way, like, oh, we're going to bring homeless to our community. They're here already. So why not focus on the residents that are here, that are homeless, the people that you know, the farm workers that are, you know for a fact, are homeless. And FEMA's another program. You guys have access to FEMA funds. You should keep knocking on FEMA's door, because they're clearly aware that there was an emergency here. And the fact that maybe their funding ran out doesn't really mean that's an in place. There's other communities, City of Austin and others, have implemented tiny home villages. So basically you could get tiny homes in a development and get more density in a space where someone feels like they're grounded. Like, I don't want to be in a 6-story building. Okay, well then you can be in a tiny home, right? So there are solutions out there that are available now. So for the small developer, the biggest hit are the fees and the time to get to build, right? Permission to operate, permission to open the door to get a resident in there. If you can compress those timelines, that helps any developer. I did a project with a city who we requested a negative declaration for the project, and the city has a right to approve it. So if it's housing, if it's a priority, if you're going to use like City of San Diego, for example, they posted online ADU plans that you can go over the counter and get a permit for, right? So there's ways to achieve success with the development and with the contractor communities, but you have to change your old school thinking first. And then you have to look out and think out of the box. And as you're changing these rules, obviously you don't want to create risk for the city or the county, but the rules are being changed and they're working. San Diego County's plan for the ADU, infill housing is what you want to call it. They're looking at that model to go statewide. And that's why I keep telling you that there's programs that are coming your way that you're not even aware of today if you're not following all the housing legislation. And kudos to the 200 who tracks all the housing bills. So you might join their organization and be on the leading edge, because they have attorneys involved with progressively getting engaged with anything to do with housing bills, right? So from the financing, there is financing available, but you have to hunt for it, and you have to kind of team up the right way to get it. But it's not like there isn't financing. So let me give you an example. If a city has a property and they're willing to have someone develop it, they can lease it for housing, or they can sell it, or they can do what's called a public-private partnership. So you have a private sector entity working with you, the city or the county, and you co-develop it. And they could take the risk of the construction. They have to be bonded. They could take the risk of the loan. And then the city would only streamline the building permitting, the inspections. One of the biggest fees out there is school fees to develop. It's a huge fee. So that can be deferred a little bit to help the developer build, and then pay those fees as they sell the units or as they rent the units. Those are things that are out of the box thinking that you probably need to bring to your policy leaders and try to adjust them and really create a more proactive way to get construction of affordable housing.
So I'm going to hand it to the last question.
Can you describe what the partnership with Native Americans is? Does it have to be on their land? Does it have to be a percentage of Native Americans going to have that housing?
So there's different ways. So if I'm a Native American and I'm a tribe owner and our tribe agrees to partner to build homes in our land, basically we have an agreement, a memo of agreement or a MOU, memo of understanding, and we legally sign a document. So that land that the tribe owns, they continue to own it. So that's one way. And then they will benefit from, let's say, the rents and all that. And then that's a separate operational agreement where the operational agreement says we, the Native Americans, keep 60% and you guys, the private sector guys, keep 40%. That's one way. Another way is a Native American group, because you could write a grant with the city, buy land. We're not talking about land on the reservation. We buy land. And when a Native American group uses their own funding, they buy that land. At a minimum, they have to be 51% owner to then be able to develop that land and maintain the sovereignty of the land. So it doesn't physically have to be on their reservation. Then you have another group where you could have a public-private partnership where a Native American group could be there, the county could be there, the city could be there, and the developer could be there, and all four have agreements. And basically that's an investment model. So there's different ways that you could approach the challenge of properties being procured. And then again, don't forget landowners. They carry the most leverage because they have the land, and the land has value to them. But maybe there's farmers that don't want to farm anymore because of the floods, right? So I would look at all the flooded farms that were flooded, because that might happen again. And I talk to that landowner and say, hey, you know, what if we relocate you, or we use your land to build infrastructure? I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done that probably weren't done, because basically you're an agricultural community. So in Sacramento, when I first went up there in 1999, we had rain for like 30-some days, and they were worried that the levees were going to bust, right? And so there was emergency construction. I think that happened recently again too. So one thing's like, why weren't the levees permanently fixed so that we don't keep having that problem when we have overflows of rain or floods or what have you, right? So that goes back to the planning. What are the planners doing to change that space so that we don't have the problem of flooding the farmland and that becoming a disaster for the whole county, right? Same thing with the utilities, because they had deferred maintenance and they had the fires, right, of the lines. They could have cut the trees, but something happened and there's fires. Now we're all paying for that, right? So preventive maintenance is part of everything you do. So when you design the project, you also have to be able to sustain and maintain it long term, right? And that becomes part of who you partner with to achieve that goal. So I see that there's various opportunities. Again, my cup's always half or more full. So I'm thinking, let's take a chance. Let's go after it. Let's go try to build something versus sitting there and waiting for someone to come and build it. Because when they come and build it, they're not going to build it for you. They're going to build it for themselves. And usually for themselves are high-end profit motives that don't help your challenges with your county residents, with your constituents, or with your local city residents and constituents. So I see that the times are coming right now, and the perfect example is PG&E signing up to do microgrids. So now you, the city, can build and be self-sustaining and make sure your hospital, your police department, your senior centers are going to keep running when they have brownouts, when they have disasters like you had. So I think you need to shift the model of what you have experienced in your emergency office services, learn from that, and then start with the funding that's available, applying for grants to rebuild and prepare for the future.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you. Before we wrap it up, Nikki will be the last speaker to address the audience. The Latino Coalition has a sign-in sheet if you want to put your information there they can get you any information that was available today, so that you can have that. Also, for future meetings that we may have, um, it helps for them to have you on their database. Once again, I just want to thank county staff. Thank you so much for making this process go very smooth, creating the infrastructure for today's meeting. Supervisor, thank you again. And Eli, your dream team, I'm going to call them. Thank you all for making today feasible and coming out here and giving valuable information. Is there anything you want to say before we turn it over to Miki? Last closing remarks?
Yeah, I want to thank my dream team. And I want to thank Jesus, who took time from his busy schedule to be part of our program here. And I want to thank all of you for caring. Because you're here because you care. And so now let's take that care and make it actionable. And the old saying, I think it was one of the Kennedys that said, some people see things as they are and ask why. I see things as they could be. And we ask why not. Well, thank you.
That's a beautiful statement.
So did everybody enjoy this? Because this is something that we've been thinking about. And as Eli mentioned, I happen to become a member of the 200 leadership group. This is statewide, and it's on housing. So we know about the bills. We know what is coming up. And so we want to share that. And when the Latino Coalition decided that, yeah, we're going to jump on board as well. This is what happens when a nonprofit cares enough about their community that they want to do something. We want to share with you the information. This information, not everybody can achieve and bring forward to you, but we tried our best. And with Eli being also on the 200 leadership group, I think we were able to do this time. But there's other concerns in the community that the Latino Coalition will be addressing. One of them is immigration. And we do have the experts in the field as well. So just so you are aware that if you signed up to be on our list for information, we'll make sure that you receive that information. But at the same time, personally, I want to thank Mindy, I want to thank the Board of Supervisors that have assisted us at one time or another. Abraham, you've always been there. Your staff, I mean, we couldn't have done it without them. And you know what, just speaking to each other, the communication is open. We want that communication from the Latino Coalition to everyone that is listening, that is watching, because this is what we're about. We're community, we're grassroots. And what concerns the elected officials concerns us. And if we can be that organization in between to bring forward information to that community that's going to help our community in several ways, then that's what we're going to continue to do. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Eli, we can't thank you enough. Rachel, thank you for assisting as well. Rachel is Eli's daughter, and she comes along with him. So, but Daryl, everybody, Joe that spoke with him, we really appreciate that. So please thank them for us. And if they're still online, thank you so much for participating today. And with that, we're going to close it. And there is another meeting coming on board, I guess, at 4 o'clock. But if you have a question for Eli, feel free to ask, okay? So thank you so much.
How are you? So I understand you just